Remarkable people overcoming remarkable challenges with resilience, dedication, community, and grit. Listen as they share their stories of overcoming adversity. Open your eyes to what is genuinely possible for all of us. Authentic Adversity with host Chris Howe.
I guess maybe he didn't think my sister was serious. And when she showed up, he like freaked out, was crying and begging, to have one more night with our daughter. So at that time I was like, okay, fine. Cause at that point I was just like, all right, well, I guess we're moving. Like, I guess, my sister came up with the intention of moving us the hell out of there. And I was with it. And, but I regret giving her to him that night. Like, he put on a really good, sob story, my child, please don't, let me have one more night with her. And so I did. And so we woke up to him and her gone the next day. And so there really wasn't a point of where I'm leaving him. I just knew I didn't have a choice but to react to the things he was doing, which ultimately led to, bigger things happening. And then ultimately, led my daughter and I to living in a domestic violence safe haven. We were homeless. And then, you know what? I don't want to say that was the worst. That was probably one of the lowest points for me, but I think the lowest was when I didn't have that, where I had no place to go. And I was pushing a stroller with our belongings.
Terrified, right?
Nowhere to go. Yeah. So realizing he had taken her, of course, first thing I do is call the police.
Of course,
he's taking her. And but my concern was he led us to believe he was driving to South Carolina where his father lives.
Okay.
So I'm freaking out because I knew he was under the influence.
Yeah.
He's erratic. He's out of his mind driving with my daughter, who's probably terrified.
Yeah.
So that was my main concern. And so they're like, well, he is her father. There's not much we can do. The police were not really any help, but they did give us a list of resources and talked us through what we needed to do. So they're like, okay, you should go to family court, go through the intake process, and they can walk you through the steps you need to take. But they're like, you definitely need to go to family court and start the process. And so that's what we did.
Okay.
Throughout that whole day, he's sometimes would call my sister's phone. At the time, I didn't have one. He would call her phone, screaming at the top of his lungs. We couldn't understand what he was saying. But we were just calm. I don't know. Something in me was just stay calm for, my daughter.
Right.
And so really our main goal was to find out where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And we were not having much luck with that. So we just, in between the calls, it's we're hitting each of the, we go to family court, and from there we learn new information that we needed to go to this place and then file this or do so we really just did everything everybody told us to do.
Right.
And while still once in a while getting the calls from him, trying to figure it out. So the end of the day comes and we're okay, still couldn't figure out from him where they were. And so ended up back at the police station. And I always say this, when I tell my story, I find that through different parts of my experiences that I came across, there was one person, each phase that was sort of that turning point for me, or somebody who I needed to interact with that had something to give me, whether it be information or just support or a knowing that it's going to be okay, or that there's hope, or I don't know, just I felt like there was something that was given to me with each one of these persons I encountered. It was kind of, I don't know if that's weird to think about,
it's not actually. It's not. I know what you mean. They're almost little
angels or something.
Yeah. Something there to say everything's going to be all right. Just keep seeing the process through. And little pieces of hope that go a long way when you're in that state. And I can imagine, not knowing where your daughter is, knowing that, your ex is on, tons of prescription meds, losing his mind, like
Mm-hmm.
probably driving erratically. And it's really quite a shame that, you know, police can't hear something like this and say, okay, we need to put an APB out for this. Now this is like a missing person situation, but because he's the dad, for some reason, it doesn't matter that he's like,
but then, yeah. And then like in family court, they turn around and say it's in the best interest of the child. Like all of their like, you know, procedures and protocols are for the best interest of the child. But really, is it? Like, no.
I mean,
maybe to an extent, but I feel like whatever these guidelines they go by are just so outdated and just don't really make sense anymore. And it's just, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really too bad, because the best interest of the child is get them out of a possibly harmful situation, and do that before anything, before you ask any questions about anything, before you test somebody if they're under the influence or not. Get the child, remove the child from that potentially hazardous situation. Should be number one, no matter what.
I agree. And I just felt like hopeless, because it's like, here are these, they're supposed to be helping. And I mean, in a way, whatever, maybe they didn't help me, whatever, in the beginning. So this officer that I encountered at the police station that night, when we just had nowhere else to turn, we're like, we'll just let this be our last attempt tonight, at least. And so we walk in, and that was just sort of like my relief. It was like a female officer, and like at her desk were like domestic violence, like posters, like all along her desk. So I was like thinking, I didn't really know advocates existed. The term domestic violence was registering because I was at family court, and like that's what kept constantly coming up. I'm like, well, damn, I guess I am that. I'm in, that's my relationship. And so I felt at ease that she had knowledge and that she understood like what I was going through. So some form of knowledge. And so she's like, all right. And this is the first I had known. I didn't know that there was a name for safety plans. I just knew like we were planning for something, and she was helping me. And so, but I later now know that as a safety plan. So she's like, all right, well, this is what we're going to do. She's like, you're going to call him and put it on speaker, and I'm going to talk you through what you need to say. And we're going to, if not get your daughter back, but at least find out where she is. I was like, okay. So
finally somebody that can actually do something here. That's great.
So I felt definitely a relief. I felt safe there. And so I called, and sure enough, found out that he never left Philly in the first place. He was like at a friend's house, and Selena, my daughter, was fine. And of course, still worried for her, because I knew she hadn't been fed properly or bathed. I was just, and she was so shaken. So then it became a fight of like, all right, so how do we get her back? So she's like, we ended up talking him into bringing her home with the condition that my sister leaves. He's like, your sister can't be there. He's like, you need to be at the house, and only you. I'm like, okay. So the plan from there was, my sister's boyfriend gave me his phone. He had like a little like burner cell phone. He's a truck driver. So he was like, just take this one. And the plan was for me to hide the phone somewhere on my body, and then if at any point I felt unsafe, make the call, let it ring a couple times and hang up. And then that would be their signal to come. So, I get there to the apartment. I'm waiting. He finally pulls up, and he's looking through the windows, like the front windows. And then he like runs and jumps in the car and drives away. And so like I run outside. I'm like running after the car, and I'm telling him to wait, please wait. And he's like, what? He's like so paranoid. He's like accused me of moving. He was like, I see boxes in the living room. You're trying to leave me. And I said, no, like we had just moved into that new apartment. So we were actually still unpacking. And so if that tells you anything, how
his head's not there.
His head was not there. And so I was like, oh my God. So like, and then like little things throughout, like now I'm at the point where I start listening to the signs, right? I start paying attention to things that could either steer me in a more dangerous direction or kind of like de-escalate things. and, hopefully like, not find myself in a dangerous situation. So
right.
I'm, with him doing that, that was like a little tip for me of like, okay, like he's not in the right frame of mind. Like, be careful.
Yeah.
Don't say the wrong thing. Just be short, be agreeable, and just stay calm. So he finally agrees. I convinced him to come inside and that we weren't in fact moving. And so we're sitting on the couch and he's reading to me like a page out of a C.S. Lewis book. I don't remember exactly what the passage was, but he was reading to me like nothing had ever happened. We're sitting on the couch. My daughter's playing on the floor. And I'm just sitting there like, this is crazy.
What the fuck's going on?
But
Yeah.
I'm just wait. I did not know what was going to happen. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, like, but I'm doing what I told myself, like, stay calm, just be, friendly, like whatever. But inside I did not feel safe. I wanted to just jump out of my skin. I wanted to like run for the hills. And so he gets up to go to the bathroom and he makes a phone call. And on the phone, he's saying that he has a gun in the car and he's not going to let anybody take our daughter, away from him. So I'm thinking like, okay, I have to take that serious.
Yep. 100%.
So I kind of go to take it scared the shit out of me anyway. So I'm like going to take the phone out to make the call, but it was too short a time. He was already coming back. So I waited. I'm like, he's going to get up again. I just felt like there was going to be another opportunity for me to do this. So I didn't want to like jeopardize my position at that time. So I'm sitting there and just like waiting. And sure enough, he gets up again, like a couple minutes later, goes back to the bathroom, closes the door. So, but I didn't wait until he got to the bathroom. As he's walking away from me, I pull the phone, make the call. So that by the time he comes out, like I had already taken my daughter. I made the call, hid the phone, had taken my daughter. He's coming out of the bathroom, sits on the couch, but I planted my daughter and I, situated us right near the front door and kind of like was playing like a game with her. And it felt like 30 seconds that they came banging on the door, and like I took her and I ran outside and he's like chasing after us down the hall.
Yeah.
And then the police, they get the door open. They're like, guns are drawn, time to like stop, and I always cry. It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I always say that like, I felt even like through everything, like even going to the safe haven, I always say that was the moment that I felt the most safe. Of like when the police arrived, I felt like the moment I stepped outside, I felt like we were just like carried out on a cloud. I just felt like it was such a surreal feeling. It really was. And so, but yeah, my sister was there, like detectives, multiple police cars. Like it was very, and then, so then I went back. My sister had a hotel that she and her boyfriend, a few blocks away. So we went to the hotel that night and stayed there. And the plan the next day was to go back to family court, file some more stuff. And then we were going to get, I think it was like the relocation or something like that, which is really hard to do in Philadelphia. I learned. Yes. And so started that process. And my sister got a U-Haul. We're packing. And I get a call from him to my sister's phone. He's like asking to speak to me, and then he's begging to talk to me in person. Sure enough, I met him, and he's like crying profusely, like admitted that he had a drug problem and said everything right that he could possibly say. And then he just completely broke, and I'd never seen him like that before. So I thought that maybe like, okay, well, maybe
that was the rock bottom that he needed to hit.
Maybe that was what he needed. Yeah. And so he ended up convincing me to stay. So the way he did that, he just said, so my sister's like packing all of our stuff on the U-Haul. She's like, and I remember he's like, why don't you just let your sister and her boyfriend, he's like, why don't you just like let them go? We'll stay behind, take a nap, and just kind of recharge. And then when we wake up, we'll all go as a family and just kind of like take that time to just sort of, breathe and just like let things settle. And then we'll like, whatever, come home and deal with it. And I believed him. I was like, okay. My sister was hysterical
Yeah.
because she knew. To me, it just sounded like, I don't know if it was just like the trauma I had just experienced or just an accumulation of everything.
Yeah.
That I was just like still not connecting those dots. I still wasn't like, no, fuck you, get away from me. I'm leaving.
Even
I,
after that sense of
mm,
absolutely relief when the cops showed up, like
yeah.
that happening, what, just days before that, right?
No, it was the day before.
The day before that.
The day before. Yeah.
It's funny how we can forget those things so quickly, right?
Yeah.
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 When we're like in the throes of whatever, whether it's addiction, a domestic violence situation, like which is also a form, I believe, of addiction, right? You're somewhat
Oh, sure.
addicted to that person, right?
Or like addicted to like pleasing this person so that they stop.
Yes.
Because you think it's you. You think you're the one.
Right.
You're like brainwashed almost like for me, I know that I felt like if I could just be a little better, if I could just be a little more perfect for this person, then he won't do this to me anymore. And it's like you love them. So you want to like, I don't know. It's a crazy way of
It
thinking.
is crazy. And to even just to say, if I was only a little more perfect, then this
Yeah.
person would be like, no, that person should
And it doesn't matter how
accept
perfect
you.
you are. Yeah.
No, you should be
You're never
perfect
good enough.
as you are. You
Yeah.
shouldn't have to try to be perfect. You should be perfect for
Right.
that person as you are. And
Yeah, exactly.
but that's
But
that's what where
yeah,
it brings
so
us, right?
I stayed and took that nap and woke up the thought that, hey, we're gonna go. Like, let's go. I'm like happy because I felt like we had made up a little bit and things were gonna be good. And he was just like a different monster. And by different, I mean just calm and just very calculate, like more calculated. He's just different. Like
Hmm.
before, he was always like paranoid and fidgety. I mean, he was still paranoid, but just his whole demeanor was different. The way he carried himself and the way he spoke,
Right.
it was a little like it was kind of like an eerie like feeling. So,
Yeah.
when we woke up, he was different and he was like, "Yeah, we're not going." I was like, "What?" Like
Mm.
getting upset. He was like, "Yeah, we're not going." And then the next morning, he um told me to get in the car and we're gonna go for a drive. And as we're driving, he's like, all right, well, we're going to family court and you're going to sign this document that says we're having 50-50 custody.
Hmm.
And really, with any custody agreement, like the relocation is like standard, like neither party can relocate without
Right.
notifying or whatever. But I didn't know how difficult that process would have been if I did want to relocate. And so I signed, well, with out of complete fear and like terror because he threatened me indirectly. So it was just like you sign this or it's not going to be good for you, were
Right.
his words. And so I signed it and that was kind of like my death sentence. So from that point, I was even more isolated. I felt tortured every day. I had nothing, like all my clothes, like everything had gone on at U-Haul with my sister. So like he refused to buy me anything. So I really just had like the clothes on my back and then my mom would send me like little care packages. So she would like include clothes for me and for my daughter, but she still had like more stuff than I did like at the house. So I just lived in a complete like dark fog for that whole year. And finally he ended up leaving to go to New York to work. It was actually Mother's Day weekend, and he had gone to work this particular job because he was needed money to pay for a trip to go be a best man in his best friend's wedding, which was in Cincinnati. And so
Okay.
I was excited because I thought I was going to get to go home and see my family.
Yep.
And and then I was happy because he was gone that weekend. And so my daughter and I planned a picnic and we're at the park and anytime he had to leave like out of like state or whatever, he'd give me like one of those like prepaid phones. So I had my prepaid phone. all of a sudden I'm getting like all these like crazy messages from him. I'm like, oh God, here we go. I'm like, of course it has to be like, you just want, I think he just wanted to like ruin my day because it's Mother's Day. He knew we were like having fun. And,
yeah.
And so, yeah, he's just like started being really nasty to me. And I just had that same calmness I had the year before when he had my daughter and I didn't know where she was. And I was just like in a state of like, I felt calm. So that I sort of had that feeling come over me again. And I wasn't giving him what he wanted. And he wanted me to apologize for something I didn't do. He wanted me to, you know, oh, I'm so like, here, how can I make it better? And like, what can I do to like make you happy kind of thing? And I wasn't doing that. My reaction to him was just like, okay. He was saying like everything you could possibly say, every name you could call somebody. I was just like, I don't know what you want me to do. I was like, okay. And he was like getting angrier and angrier. And I was just like, I had nothing for him. And so that went on for a few hours. And finally I just got fed up. I called my mom and told her what had been happening that whole year of like just the abuse and isolation and just what the things he was doing. And she just couldn't believe it because the times where she did speak to me, which wasn't often, it was like, oh, everything's fine. I just, you know, you put a blanket over it. And so she said, why don't you and Selena leave early for the trip? She's like, I'll send you money for a train ticket. She's like, then he'll come for the wedding. She's like, you guys figure it out after. She's like, you can't keep living like this. I'm like, you're right. I can't. And again, my daughter was getting older now. Like, so she was like seeing and experiencing things too. Not abuse from him, but just through like what she was seeing, you know, between he and I, she was impacted by. So we I took her up on it and she sent me money. I bought the tickets and I didn't tell him we were leaving until the train was in motion because of my fears and experiences of him not letting me leave, or he would have found a way to not let me leave. So waited for the train was in motion. And then of course, like the just flood of messages started coming through that I'm kidnapping, that I'm, you know, the worst mother in the world. How could I do this to her? So like everything I was doing was to my daughter. Like, how do I do this to her? And saying all these, like just everything under the sun you could possibly say. So it got to a point where I thought to myself, nobody's going to believe any of this if I don't find a way to document what he's saying. So that's where my mind kind of went into like that fighting mode of like, no, like this is not okay. And I'm not gonna like stand for this anymore. I started standing up for myself just by, you know, documenting things. And so I, my daughter had like one of my old broken iPhones that it was still, you could still use it to play games on, but it's just like the screen was a little messed up. And so I had to take it from her and use the camera on the old iPhone to take photos of the prepaid phone because the memory is filling up every like, I don't know. It was literally filling up every minute or so. But it was, by the time everything was said and done, 17 hours of messages that didn't stop coming through.
Wow.
I mean, thousands and thousands that we've used like in court evidence and testimonies. And it was a lot. So
thank God you did that though, right? Like to have that sense that like this needs to be documented because people, it can't be just a he said, she said.
Because and also I knew that against him because he's a master manipulator. And if it went to court, which did happen in the beginning, where they believed him over me, even with my evidence, I went through some messed up shit in family court because he was, a manipulator. So anyway, I got to a point where he's like, no, just stay there. I'll bring your stuff down. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Like, and then he was like threatening me with like court document headings where he wouldn't show me the whole document. It was just like a heading. So I thought maybe it was just a Google image and he's trying to scare me kind of thing, that he's like filed something. But we called family court and they're like, well, they said that there's nothing on the docket for us. No court hearings in the future. So we just I just went off of that. But then we ended up consulting with an attorney here. My family had to take out a loan on their business to pay for the attorney and ultimately. And so it turns out that he filed like an emergency return, but lied completely which anybody can do. You just have to sort of make the judge feel that the child is in danger. You don't necessarily need like solid proof at that time.
Wow.
But it's also too like, who would make up something like that? And he made up some like pretty terrible things about my family and the fact that we're staying with, you know, these people who are he's describing as basically monsters in the court document, but which was everything ended up being like, you know, proven wrong like at the court hearing. At the end of it, the judge is like, well, do you want to relocate? And of course, absolutely. I want to be close to my family. I need the support. Like I am now basically homeless because he renewed our lease. Our year came up and he renewed it without my name on it. So I didn't have anywhere to go, and he was refusing me back into my own home and got rid of everything else I had left. Any evidence that I lived there. That was the point where it was just like, okay, well, I'm here. But the judge did say I can leave, but my daughter has to stay in Philly until the court hearing, which was months away. Right. And I'm just thinking, I am not leaving her with him. And nor was he trying to come up with a solution. It was just like, no, you can't. Like, he was just like refusing everything. He wasn't being agreeable to anything. I'm trying to work with him. Like, listen, like we are her parents. Like she needs a safe place. Like, please, like he had friends. He can go stay with his friends. He's done it before. I didn't have that. So for me, I ended up having to contact people I hadn't contacted or had interactions with in so long because I was so isolated for so long. So that took a lot for me to do. And some of the people I reached out to were like, no, they didn't. They're like, we don't want to be involved. I'm just like,
really?
Let my kid have me go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People who I call people who I thought would be like, yes, in a heartbeat. No. Then there was a family who I actually used to nanny for just after my daughter was born because we were pregnant at the same time. So this was somebody I actually considered a friend. We were pregnant together. And then I was a nanny for her son. Our kids are 3 weeks apart. And when she went back to work, I took care of him for years.
Right.
You know, well, I mean, yeah, like 2 years I did, 2-3 years. And so she first said yes. And I'm like, oh God, thank God. Because my mom's there too. My mom's like here supporting me. And bless her heart, like she's like, we can't keep affording hotels. Like we have to figure this out before I leave. She's like, I'm out, you know, we have to do this today before I leave because I'm not comfortable leaving you without. So I'm like, okay. I called this said friend and, you know, first she said yes. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy. Like, thank you so much. I was like, even just for a few days, that's all I needed to just hammer down on like resources and figuring, like, I'm good with that stuff. You know, I would have figured it out had I had just a few days, roof over our heads, a safe place. So yeah, when she said yes, she's like, just come to my work. She's like, I'll bring you a key down. You know, so I'm going to go to the house, yada, yada. So I get there and I'm like texting her. I'm like, okay, I'm here. No response.
Oh no.
And I'm like, I'm downstairs and here I am like looking over my shoulder thinking like he probably like, what if he followed us there? Like what's happening? Like I was so like on edge everywhere I went. And I'm like looking and I'm thinking like, are they planning? Then I'm thinking they're planning something against me. He was very close with them as well. And so I'm thinking like, oh my God, are they, I don't know. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Of course. So you get a million different thoughts going through your mind about what possibly could be going wrong here.
Yeah.
So she never did answer the text?
Called her, texted her, no answer. Wow. So I'm like, oh my God, just like my stomach just dropped. And so I'm actually leaving her office building. And it's not like, it's like, you know, very secure. It's not like I could just go up the elevator and go to her office. Like there's like these big security things. You have to like a swipe to go through the gates or whatever. And so, yeah, I'm leaving. And then I get a text from her saying like, we don't really, you know, we don't think it's a smart idea. Like my ex Waylon is his name in New York. Waylon told us like what was going on. I'm like, and you're listening to this crazy person and you know, he's crazy. And they're like, we just have to say no at this time. And I'm like, what the fuck could he have said to make them say no? And I'm just like, all right, well, that was like a blow because.
But that, you know what? Sometimes this is like, I'm on about this a lot with a lot of different people, but like, I think sometimes these tough times truly show you who really cares, who is really there for you and who is a true friend. And like deserves a seat at your table, right?
Absolutely.
Because
agreed.
it's really, it can be quite eye-opening when you need the people that have counted on you for something in the past, and now you're in this dire situation. You just need a couple nights, like, to keep you and your daughter safe. There should be no question. But that's I don't know. I call it like sometimes I look back on those situations where that's happened to me, and I say, well, I'm thankful for that little friend inventory I got to do. I get to put that person in the box over here. Like, I don't do a favor for this person again, and never will I ask again. You know, I'm not going to waste my time, and you don't deserve my time and my energy. Exactly. You know what I mean? Like that. Sometimes it's an awful thing, but sometimes it's like, thank you for showing me who you really are. You know?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, awful situation for you to be in. Like,
yes. And so, I mean, so much happened between that time and the time we ended up in the safe haven. And just the constant fight. I mean, it was a literal fight every day. So it ended up being that there was a girl who used to watch my daughter at the gym. It was like after, I don't know, maybe when my daughter was 2, I started like jumping back into like kickboxing and like MMA classes again near my house. And I was only allowed to do that because he was doing it too. So it was like, oh, well, so he can like watch me. So there was a front desk lady there, and she would like watch my daughter while I like trained. And so she was the person that said yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, oh my God. Like it was like, no, I just kind of told her like a small explanation. She's just like, yeah, like no hesitation. So I'm like, thank God. So that's where we ended up for about a month, I would say. But during that time, that's how I learned about Women Against Abuse and what they could offer me. And I felt like that was like, I'm like, okay, this seems like the most logical, thing for me to pursue. I felt something about it. I felt like safe, like reaching out to them. So every day I'm like on the phone, on the hotline, talking to advocates, retelling my story over and over. I must have told my story every single day, like 1,000 times. But then it got to a point where the safe haven, they operate 2 of them, and there's only 100 beds in each safe haven. So even though there's like this 24-hour emergency shelter, there wasn't always space. So at the time I needed, there wasn't any space. And so, but they're like, keep calling every day at this time. And just keep telling your story, keep telling your story. So I did that. And then as I was doing that, I was, going to like different organizations and offices and speaking to other advocates there and trying to like figure out the best solution for my daughter and I. And because it was either that or like a city shelter, which I didn't feel safe going there for either of us. And so I'm just, working my ass off trying to get us into some sort of home. And so it turned out that he found out where we were and was like threatening this woman that we were staying with. And she ultimately kicked us out because he manipulated her and he made it look like we were the bad ones. And he's threatened to call DHS on me, like all this crazy stuff. And so at that point, that was when like the rock bottom hit because she gave him her address and he came with a taxi cab. And that was the first I had seen him in since like the craziness that happened. I was like, I don't know, I was really afraid. And he's standing there taking video of me removing my things from her house. And she's angry at me and was like threatening to have her family come and beat me up if I didn't leave and things like that. And
Jeez.
And so
this is in front of your daughter.
And he's just taking a video of me as I'm bringing all of our stuff out. And mind you, we didn't have a lot kind of like going into this, but I accumulated a lot of belongings because my mom was sending us packages. And so we had a lot more stuff. And I'm thinking like I ended up leaving a lot of things behind because I have 2 hands on a stroller. That's all I have. So we get in a cab. I had no choice but to get in the cab with him. And he's like on the way back toward downtown, he's like, you better think fast, think on your feet because all your shit's going to be on the curb when we get back. And I was just like, you really just said that? Okay. So I didn't say anything, called my mom, told her what happened, that we need a room. And she's like, well, we'll they figured it out. They were able to pay for another hotel. And at the hotel, I'm just like looking at the person, you know, at the desk. I'm like praying that they just like make eye contact with me so they could see I wasn't okay. And they didn't, unfortunately. And then they, of course, said the room out loud, so he knew what room we were in. He insisted on helping us carry our things up. So from the normal outside person, they think like
Right.
this, look at him, he's helping his family. No, he just wanted to get us alone and into that room.
Right.
And so once we got up, he like wouldn't leave, and it was just got to the point. It was just like he was there for like a couple of hours, and finally I was just like, you need to like leave. You need to leave. You can't be here anymore.
Yeah.
My daughter was crying, and he's like, well, if you're a little bit nicer, I would have helped you out, and then left. I was like, oh my God. But then as soon as he left, I'm like back on the phones again, like making calls, like back on with like the hotline. And so the next day, we ended up staying, I'm still like making the calls, but we ended up staying until the hotel, like they're like, you need to leave kind of thing.
Right.
It was just like, I'm leaving until you kick me out. So, cause I still had no plan. And my means of communications with my ex was through email, because I refused to speak with him on the phone. I didn't want him to have my number. Plus I wanted to have documents. Like I wanted to be able to document every single conversation I had with him. So I emailed him and asked him if we could leave our belongings in the basement, which was a shared basement of the building, so that I could figure something out throughout the day. And no response from him. So I thought to myself, well, maybe a neighbor could let me in and it'll just be that. So I'm making my way to the apartment building. And that was that moment for me where I was just feeling just at my lowest, because I felt like I had really failed my daughter. I thought I had failed as a parent, because I was just walking through downtown Philadelphia with just my belongings and no home. And my daughter had to walk. I had to hold her hand and push the stroller because all of our shit was piled on top. Right. And I had no choice but to I couldn't cry. I didn't want to make her worried. And I just remember fuck, what the fuck? Am I going to do? And I just felt like this is what that feels like, of just homeless, So we're walking and a cab driver stops me. He's honking the horn. I'm thinking he's trying to hit on me. Right. And he's like, ma'am. Then he rolled his window down. He's like, ma'am, are you okay? And I'm looking at him. He's like, I noticed a man following you. He's like, he's been following you for the last 2 blocks. And he said, describe my ex's tattoo down to his arm, and said he took off running that way and pointed toward the apartment. And I was just like, fuck.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So I get there, I knock on the door, to the main entrance, and nobody's answering. So I look through the mail slot, and he's just standing in the hallway, just facing the door. And I'm like, it was so weird, the weirdest feeling. So anyway, I put the video on my phone in case something happens, and ultimately he lets me put our things in the basement. And then I left, and then just went to the playground where my daughter could run around as I made calls, and kind of came up empty-handed that day, unfortunately. And my mom just convinced me to go to the Salvation Army. She's like, I know you don't want to do that, but you have no choice. It's like that or sleep on a park bench. Selena can't do that. You can't, So it ended up being a physical altercation when we went back to get our things from the basement. And I ended up having to run out of the apartment and with my daughter, and ran to the nearest police station. And as I'm telling them what happened, they get a call from him, and he told them that I pushed him down the stairs and that he had injuries to back it up. So which was completely false.
Right.
And also, if he did have any injuries, I knew all too well that he injured himself, because he's done that before when I've threatened to call the police from our past fights, and he would punch himself in the face and say that he'll tell the police that I hit him first, and it was self-defense. And so then I would always be afraid to call. So they ended up arresting me.
No.
And gave Selena to him. Yeah.
Oh my
Never been
God.
in trouble, never been arrested in my life. And I remember, like, I'm like, can you please arrest me? There's like a back room. So it wasn't done in front of her. And yeah, I went and sat in a holding cell for 4 or 5 hours
Mm-hmm.
that evening. And finally, the detective came and she said, listen, you have a choice to go before the judge. And we have no control over what happens. She said, where you can waive your rights and come talk to us. And she's like, I highly recommend you talk to us. And so, without knowing it, that was like my second like little angel person that
Yeah.
I encountered. And I get to her office, and it's just like clearly she was an advocate. And even though I was handcuffed to this chair in her office,
Mm-hmm.
I felt relieved.
Mm-hmm.
And she listened to everything I had to say, the leading up to what happened and what happened. And um, yeah, then took me back down to the holding cell, and I was released within like, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. And
Right.
I wasn't charged with anything. And so I felt like, okay, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
So even though I still didn't have my daughter, and then I had no plan. I was just, they told me I needed to file an emergency PFA at like our main police station. So I ended up, I mean, it was like middle of the night by
Right.
this point, and I went to catch the bus and like convince the bus driver to let me on for free because
Right.
I'm just like, can you please consider letting me ride? And he did. And yeah, filed the PFA, but was unsuccessful in with days of trying to serve him because he made himself like invisible
Oh, yeah.
and unreachable. So yeah, this was like a whole thing with like court and the PFAs that went on for a while, but finally so when it was granted and I had a court date within like I think a couple, well, it was like less than a week. And this was like my first I guess, like being reunited with my dad. It's like, even
Okay.
though some time had passed, I was angry with my dad for a really long time. But then as I like got a little older and through like martial arts, I found healing in that and forgave him.
Yeah.
But we didn't really have a relationship. We'd talk like maybe once or twice a year.
Okay.
But I was just kind of like, okay, it's fine. I'm not mad at him. We just don't have a relationship.
Right.
And so, but it turns out my sister's like, hey, we're going to come up and support you like at this hearing and, you know, try to help you after like whatever you need. And so, yeah, that's when she told me my dad had forfeited his family vacation because he's been remarried for many, many years, couple decades now.
Okay.
And they do like a family vacation every year.
Mm-hmm.
And like he said, I don't want to go on this vacation. I want to go be with my baby. And
Wow. Okay.
came up. Yeah. That was special.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that was probably like the first time and like that I could remember that my dad was there like when I needed him the most. Yeah. So
that's huge.
And since then, I mean, we have a great relationship now. And yeah, they went to court with me, all the things, and then literally we step out of the court building and I get the call from Women Against Abuse that they had space for me.
Okay.
And so it was just like heaven sent. And yeah, they sent us the location that afternoon. My dad and sister dropped me off that night. And that was a weird feeling of like being driven to this unknown place. I had no idea what I was walking into. I didn't know what it looked like,
Right.
I was unfamiliar with the area. Didn't know what to expect.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I get there and I was greeted at the door and just kind of cried and had this like big release. And then another feeling of like this surge of like, all right, now I can fight and get my life back. And it was like an opportunity for me at that point. I'm like, okay, I'm here, but like there was so much good like that I could see just even in that moment at like my lowest. I was just like, okay, like it's time to like to fight and like get my life back.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure that place and that environment offered you that opportunity to to just take a breath and say,
yeah,
I'm ready to fight. I'm ready for all this now. And you know that finally you're somewhere safe with people who understand what's going on, who are not going to question it, and probably I would imagine in a house full of women who can empathize with everything you have to say, and you can speak openly and honestly and feel like a real sense of community with a bunch of people who are trying to heal from the same thing.
Yeah. I take it as, I mean, listen, there were good and bad days and hard days, hard to get out of bed days and all of that. But like, I just, you think of like what your reason is, like, why are you fighting? Obviously I'm fighting for myself, but like, obviously my daughter was the main, the focus in that. And so, it was just a literal fight every single day, and just like being drugged through the mud through the family court system of being looked at as like, the poor Black woman, like poverty stricken, can't take care of her kids. She lives in a safe haven. That was like the picture that was painted of me.
Wow.
And he's comes from this well-to-do family in Tennessee, and they have money and they have the best attorneys. And
oh, really?
he was a master manipulator. Yeah. And I had attorneys, but good ones too. But it's just like sometimes it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work the way it should.
The wrong picture is being painted, right? Like, it's like, that's so frustrating.
I mean, there was a point. Yeah, there was even a point where they made me pay child support, and like, I'm just a server. Like, what do you want? But this was like some time after I had transitioned out and everything. But anyway, I don't know how long I was there before I started training again, but I had some people reach out to me. They're like, we really think you should like give this another go. And so put myself back into training. And that's really what like lit a fire underneath me, because I started, like, I got my confidence back. I was feeling just so empowered and confident and just stronger every day. And like every day I felt like I was, in any time I had to face him, I felt like I was here and he like getting smaller and smaller, because his true colors were starting to show. And at every turn it was like I would be agreeable to everything that he would want. It's like, whatever you want. Okay, let's just sign the paperwork. No, I don't want to do that. Last minute we'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. And then come up with something else. I'm like, okay. It was just like this whole stupid cycle of him just wanting so much control, but had none at the same time. Because I had a PFA, or drop-offs for my daughter would be at the police station, which was great for me. I felt safe doing that, but he still found ways to intimidate me.
Right.
And so if anybody's listening, it might seem like something small and that it might not matter. But I find that, like, if you have a protection order and somebody does anything to intimidate you or threaten you, if it's against that other person, like, you have a right to file a police report, speak to a detective, and then they can put a warrant out for his arrest. That's what happened for me. Right. Like, he would leave me notes. They weren't always like menacing or like scary, but it was just like this whole like 5-6 page letters of like, how could I do this? I'm the one. It's all me. And like, so he would do stuff like that. Sometimes he would just like say things under his breath, or when he leave, like when, and it would scare.
For sure.
And so every single time I felt threatened or unsafe, I filed a report. I would wait for him. I would stay, let him leave. And whether it was like, no matter which way we were switching, like if he was taking her, I would like let them go and I'd stay, and then speak to a detective. And I know sometimes they were annoyed by me. I didn't care. Right. But eventually they put a warrant out and he was arrested for violating the PFA.
Okay.
And then that kept him at bay. Like, he didn't do it anymore. So that's just like a tip for, and I also find that too with like documenting things, even if you feel like it's not going to matter. It's so small. How could this make a difference? It does. So I always tell people to like write everything down and document everything, even if you don't think it's going to make a difference. So
for sure. That's so important. And I appreciate that you say that, because people need to know these things, right? Like, before it's too late.
Yeah. So after, I'm training and getting myself back and all these things, things started sort of like shifting for me. And then I started having like the mindset of like wanting to help other people in my similar situation. Yeah. But I was still at the safe haven. So I was like, I need to kind of like heal a little more before I can pour into other people. Okay. So, but I realized through like martial arts and what that was giving me, I wanted to give that to others.
Okay.
Because at the Safe Haven, there's not really like a fitness program there, like exercising. They have like a Zumba thing like once a week, but
Yeah.
nobody ever participated. Um, so I thought to myself, well, that could be like filled with something that can make a real difference for
Right.
people. So after 2 years after I transitioned out of the Safe Haven, I brought the idea back to Women Against Abuse. So that was like my initial reconnection with them,
Okay.
and like the work I do with them now as an advocate, and now
Yes.
serving on the board of directors, which is kind of cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, I was like, listen, I want to like create this program, like a self-defense and fitness program, um, here at like the same safe haven where my daughter and I live. We lived there for 4 months, I should add.
Yeah.
And she came back with me to help. I also I brought in another partner who helped with the kids there,
Okay.
because I wanted those who were participating to just, who were parents, would have just like that full like self-care
Yes.
experience, and not have to worry about like, their kid and whatever.
Right.
So my friend would have activities set up for them, games and different things, and oftentimes my daughter would help with that side, and sometimes she would help me with what I was doing. And so it was really a really cool experience. But then with we ended up sort of moving on from that, just because of like COVID, and
Sure.
my
Yeah.
MMA career was picking up and different things. So it just became a conflict. But I wanted to still stay involved with the organization. So from that, they started to call on me to do speaking engagements and
Yeah.
accompanying them to Harrisburg, our state capital, and like speak to legislators and state representatives. And so I actually worked on a Senate bill. I advocated for a Senate bill with one of our senators here in Philadelphia, and
Wow.
it was ultimately passed. And so
Great.
basically, the bill was to is an emergency like safety initiative for those who resided in the housing authority. I think, yeah, that's the name. And so basically, if you reside within that and you're experiencing an emergency situation where you need to relocate,
Yeah.
you can do so without questions asked, but like still, you don't have to like lose your assistance within
Okay.
that organization. They'll like place you somewhere else with like a confidential address and all of that. But I've just maintained over the years all of the relationships
Yeah.
and things with all of like the senators and state officials and stuff. And so that's been like really fulfilling for me, because now it's like I feel like I have more power to like help more people through these relationships.
Yeah. I bet.
And
Yeah.
so but yeah, through that I've just been like doing a lot of like speaking engagements and a lot of giving back and outreach in the community. And I'm a very active community, they call it a community awareness representative. And
Okay.
so I travel all across the city to different events on behalf of the organization, and just kind of on the front lines and sharing resources. And I get a lot of folks that come to me and sharing their stories as well.
Yeah.
So I like that I can be that safe space for someone else to share and to feel like lifted, after
Yeah.
the conversation. So it's
For
been,
sure.
yeah, definitely like really fulfilling work. And it's a shame that anybody has to go through anything like that. But I find that like, I know for me, I feel like I had to go through that so I can be this person you see today,
For
and
sure.
help so many people. Yeah. So
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, as unfortunate as these situations can be, stories like yours are, and the fact that you're out there advocating and on the front lines, being somebody that is giving back to the community and like being that safe space for people, that is a huge thing. And I can imagine in the mental health and addictions world, I do a lot of that stuff as well, public speaking and stuff like that. And just to, just to get out there and talk to people and open up and tell my story, or like go to the prison and tell my story in there and have guys come to me and like open up about their, I'm sure, I would imagine it's very much the same for you, that people will open up to you after hearing your story in ways that they never would have felt comfortable
yeah,
with
they
anyone
feel
else.
you feel alone,
Yeah.
you know? So I feel
But
like
they
it's definitely, yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, hearing that piece of relatability that they
Hmm.
may have in hearing your story, that
Yeah.
to say, yes, like, I know that feeling, and that you explained my life. Like, that is the emotion that I've been struggling with for so many years, and
Yeah.
you just unlocked this opportunity for me to share about it.
Yeah. It's
That is
amazing.
really special.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I do now. And, I mean, I'm, fighting. I guess I kind of do a lot of different things,
Yeah,
but
it seems like
I
it.
find that like with fighting, like my platform is just another way for me to like reach more and more people, just kind of
For
like
sure.
reach the masses in that way. So I just like to inspire people and like and give hope.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone to feel how I felt going through all that and not knowing. I had to literally learn as I
Yeah.
went because I wasn't aware of the things that were available to me until I called the police or until I, had to make, you know, until I had no choice but to like go through the
Right.
motions. But like, I think that it's important that people know that there's resources, that there is help,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
that it's okay to ask for help, that they're not alone, and that like it's nothing to be humiliated or embarrassed about. And yeah, I mean, if you need help, you need help. But I think that it's yeah, important. Like I said before, like when there were these like safety plans
Hmm.
being made for me, I didn't know what those meant at the time.
Right.
Had I known about a safety plan, I would have, I don't know, like if I would have, it's just good to have one in place regardless whether or not something
Yeah.
happens. Like don't wait for something to happen. But if like, I think we all have like that intuition of like, this is not a safe relationship for me. And
Right.
maybe you don't know how to get out of it and you don't know what's going to happen. So I think it's important to just, you know, take preventative measures, like have things in place for yourself so that if something happens, then you're prepared. But if something doesn't, like thankfully nothing, it doesn't, you're
Yeah.
able to like move on. That's ideal. But, in a perfect world, but
Right.
oftentimes, you're just reactive to things. And,
For sure.
um, yeah, there's just, again, if I would have known about some of the resources and different things. And so, yeah, I think that's another reason why I like being on the front lines and,
For sure.
being in front of people and like sharing, whether it's just handing them a card for the hotline, whether it's, explaining like our services and different things we offer. It's just nice to
Yeah,
have the knowledge and they can share it maybe with somebody that's going through something as well. So,
definitely. And I'm sure in the hopes that somebody doesn't have to do all that work that you had to do to find these things out, that
yeah.
you can
Hmm.
take some of those steps out of the equation for somebody
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
them right to where they need to be sooner than later, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, that's amazing. And I did want to ask about this. Your relationship with your daughter now. Is this
Hmm.
is this must be because she's gone through this with you. This is a something that you and her have experienced together. What's the conversation like? Is it very open and honest, and um, like when you two are talking about what's gone on and what's happened, and do you is she aware of what everything meant and where everything, like what how the story really
Yeah.
happened? Like, is
Sure. Yeah. She's aware, but she's unaware of like the details. Like she
yes,
doesn't know like the scary stuff, but she's understands that we were at a safe haven
yeah,
because we were experiencing domestic violence and she knows what domestic violence is. Um, but in terms of like, it was definitely work to
hmm,
get to where we are now because once everything had settled, so I'll start without getting into too much detail. So we
yeah,
finally, when it came to like our custody hearing, because we still had the 50-50 and I was already like kind of really getting back on my feet and
yeah,
like getting my independence. So we still had like the 50-50, but we were still kind of like fighting for full, like I
right,
wanted full custody and what he wanted full custody just to kind of like get back at me. And so it
sure,
was like, um, I remember like she was experiencing like a lot of neglect and like really bad things when she was in his care.
mm,
And so like things were like she called me once because she was so hungry that she ate a stick of butter and it made her sick. And like, so like stuff like that. And just like, I mean, lots of, I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah. You
gets
don't have to
worse,
go
but
into detail. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
but she's, so she was going through a lot. And
Mm.
so I started filing like emergency orders. Like, this is not gonna, I'm not gonna allow this to happen. If I have to file something every day, I'm gonna file something every day.
Yep.
So I just kept filing and finally got a hearing granted. And it was just, luckily I was documenting. So I had all the proof and
Mm-hmm.
like emails and things. And my mom was also somebody who was very helpful in that, because for whatever reason, he called on my mom for, I think he felt more like drawn to her than his own mom. So
Mm.
he always called my mom, would just kind of like, the floodgates would open. He would just like tell
Oh,
her
wow.
all these things.
Yeah.
So there was once he told my mom that he was hearing voices in the walls. And so like he was like cutting holes in the walls and put
Mm.
garbage bags over their windows because he thought drones were flying by, spying on him. So like it was
Yeah.
getting really bad.
Yeah.
So she was also like impacted by that. She was
Sure.
experiencing and seeing it. So yeah, finally we got the hearing. We get in front of the judge, and we were his first and last hearing of the day. Like, he canceled his whole docket after taking like a look at our case.
Is that
He
right?
canceled. We're 8 hours of
Whoa.
reviewing evidence, testimonies. He interviewed my daughter, my mom, the people
Uh-huh.
that came on his side. The entire day we were in court, and the judge could not believe it had gone this far, that
Wow.
how unnecessary the things that we had to go through.
Yeah.
Which I agree.
Yeah. Sounds
And
like it. Yeah.
so, you know, that's all it took, was just to get in front of the right judge. Like, all
Yes.
judges should be like that. It shouldn't have
Right.
taken us years before, years of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So he ended up granting me temporary full custody so that they could investigate and have him like mentally assessed and all the things. And
Yeah.
so we went back to court, I don't know, a couple months later maybe. And he just had already like I don't know, he was just so crazy and just out of it.
Mm.
And the judge was just like, they
Not a
ended up
chance,
granting
right?
me sole custody
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah.
Sole physical and legal custody, and which is, I mean, people in Philly, if have gone through the family court system, know it's almost impossible to do that. But our case has been on, like, they still remember our case, because
Really?
I'm still in contact with my attorney who represented me through all of that, and she's like, I think we do like not monthly check-ins, but like every few months we like check in
Yeah.
with each other. And
Yeah.
she's like, they still talk about your case. And I remember when they granted, before she read the final order, they called in, I don't know, it's probably like 10 or 12 officers to like line the court, because they didn't know, they were afraid that he was going to like do
Oh.
something upon hearing the final order.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to be escorted out of family court, and we hadn't driven. It's like my mom flew in, and she was staying at a hotel nearby, so they had to like escort us like down the street, like all these
Wow.
officers, to the, because they were afraid of that that he would do
He was
something.
that far gone, right? Yeah.
We're that far gone, and it was like that our case was a
Jeez.
big deal there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but after that, because of everything my daughter had gone through, I didn't want to, I didn't know how to approach her
Yeah.
sometimes, because I knew that he interrogated her a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and would intimidate her. So I didn't want her to feel like I was questioning her, even though she knew it was like loving and I'm like concerned. But I was like, no, let me just, I made the decision to put her in a trauma-based therapy
Okay.
program. So we
Hmm.
found a really good one, and she completed it and like really thrived there. But like, it
Yeah.
was really great for us, because like she had her own thing, but then maybe once a week, the therapist would bring me in
Okay.
on her sessions, and it would kind of be like our safe space to talk about like whatever she felt like talking about, and
Yeah.
with the understanding that I wasn't questioning her, and that like we can
Yeah.
talk about things freely and she won't get in trouble. Like, I'm not gonna, nothing's gonna change. Like,
Right.
we got to a really good place, like where we just talk about everything. And
That's awesome.
she doesn't really talk about him much now.
Yeah.
Or I don't know the last time she did, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
There was like a moment which I knew would come. And I think something too is really important as a parent who's gone through like abuse, like an abuse with an abusive partner, is that I always try to refrain from talking badly about my ex
Yes.
to or around my daughter, because I didn't want to influence her decision on how she felt about her father. And as she got older, if she chose, like, I want it to be her choice only, not
Yeah.
because it's like something I said,
Yes.
or did. Yeah. So, anytime she did, even like when the times were like really bad, she would bring him up and say, "Oh, me and Daddy did this," and I would just say, "That's nice," or like, "That's really great," and I always would just leave it at
Yeah.
that, because I also too realize that whatever memories she does have, if they're good memories, like that's what I want her to hold on to.
Of course.
Even though it's like I want to be like this piece of shit, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I that's not my choice. It's her choice to choose how she feels, and so
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you said, that whatever conclusion is gonna come needs to come from her, and
yes,
and like you said, whatever memories that she has, but positive memories, that should be kept. We have the same, like, so I mean, Joe's son is my stepson, and we have the same sort of thing with his dad, you know, like there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and we smile and say, you know, I I'm glad you guys had a FaceTime call, and I hope everything's okay. Say hi to him on the FaceTime call. There's, and there's so much there that I have to hold back, but
yeah, but we have to set
he's,
an example. Yeah,
for sure. And I know that there's gonna come a day that he says, what really happened here? Why did this situation go the way it went? He's already seen some of the things, and come to some of the conclusions that I think in his mind he knows that he's safe with us. You know, there's gonna be, and the older he gets, there's gonna be conclusions that he'll come to, but I don't want Joe and I don't want to have any influence on those. If the hard questions come, we'll answer them as openly and honestly as possible, but we would never ever say anything derogatory, or that we, as far as he knows, we every we're just happy that everybody's happy,
yeah,
like, and that's, and it's a struggle. It's like,
it
and I
is.
can
It
imagine it.
is. That's hard work.
It
It
is hard
really
work,
is.
but
Yeah, it
it's
definitely.
the best thing, and
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the eh, best things we can give our children, like
mhm.
through dealing with these traumas too, is because then I feel like I'm empowering her to make her own decisions. And sometimes I think people think like, our children don't know what's best for them. I think to an extent, it's like, don't do that, it's dangerous, like kind of stuff. But I think like we all, like big or small, have intuition. We all
Yep.
have like, I don't know, a sense of like knowing who we are. And I don't want to take that away from her, like take away her ability to make decisions, because like she knows how she feels, like, and she
Yeah.
should be able to like, I should like validate, you know what I mean? Not necessarily like tell her how she should feel.
Right.
So I think that's important. That's
For
amazing that
sure.
you guys have been able to do that for years too. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but she like, yeah, had a moment where maybe she was almost like 9, maybe 10,
Okay.
where she just like started crying, like angry. We were talking about her dad that day, and she's like, I like what she said, she's angry. She doesn't understand why, like he wouldn't want her, and things like that. So like we had like I talked her through that, but I knew the time would come where she's like, I want to change my name. I don't want anything to do with him. And I'm like, okay, that's your choice. If she said, I want to call my dad, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm just like trying to be supportive of like how she feels. So like whether it was like her being angry like she was, or if she
Mhm.
said, I miss my dad, I want to talk to him. Now I would want to support her and say yes, but it would also depend on him and what kind of like state of mind he was in. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like if it was like safe for her to talk to him, it
For
would
sure.
depend. But I wouldn't be like just flat out no,
No.
you know.
Well, you have to she has to have a voice. She has to know that she has a voice.
Definitely.
And she has yeah, for sure. And
So, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, so is there pretty much like no contact at the, like,
Yeah, no
yeah.
contact. He ended up moving to Tennessee after the final court order and has not had contact with her since. He's tried to, well, I learned that from his family that he got like strung out on drugs.
Yeah.
Like meth and heroin, like he's homeless. He's in and out of jail, sleeps under a bridge, which is sad, like, but
yeah, it is really sad.
It's not really my responsibility or I can't save him, just
nope.
like I never like I can't say I never should have like tried to save him in the beginning, but it's not like I could have anticipated this, but I kind of feel like it's sort of like the same thing. Like in the beginning, I'm like tried to save this guy, and ended up losing myself and so much along the way. And then now, like now he really needs saving, but I can't save him. Like
you did your time, like yeah, like that's the thing. And in that case, and that is something I can speak to, is the addiction piece. Is like there's nothing, there's no words you could speak, there's no actions you could take that would actually change him. He needs to figure that out on his own or not. And we all get to our breaking point, to our emotional bottoms. And so that for some of us that prompts change, for some of us it doesn't. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, that's I'm sad to hear that he's gone down that road, but it's certainly it's not your responsibility, and not for you to concern yourself with at this point. You're doing all sorts of positive things in your life. You're being a strong example to your daughter, and educating her, and you're certainly stopping the cycle. Do you know what I mean? Like you're doing a great job at that, and you're sharing your story. You're being so so vulnerable and open and honest, and it's not easy to talk about this stuff. And I just want to I really just want to applaud you for your ability to talk about this. I want to tell you that, like, I'm so proud of you, for doing all that you've done. And I know my wife would say this, she would probably say it much better than me, but she's a huge fan of yours, just in so many ways, because and as I hear your story, I really know why she connects with your story and you so much. There are so many parallels there to her story as well. So it's certainly touched me in many ways. And just hearing that, and hearing the strength that you've been able to kind of gain through this, and the resiliency that you've shown and continue to show is really quite awe-inspiring. So I really appreciate, honestly, I really appreciate your time and your story. And I know that somebody out there is going to hear something that they can relate to. And my hope is that this podcast, and this interview with you is going to change at least one person's life, and at least one more person isn't going to have to suffer because they've heard your message of hope and inspiration. So before we close out, I normally just ask the guest if you want to, like, drop your social media handles, or where anybody can find you if they're looking to follow you or connect with you in any sort of way.
Yeah. So, I mean, Instagram's kind of just my main funnel for everything. So my handle is at Bad Mama. So it's BAD_MMAMA.
I had to read it a couple times the first time I saw it. Yeah. No, I like it though. It's very suiting. Yeah. And so
shoot me a message. I kind of, like I said, it's like my funnel for, like,
for sure,
everything. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, and I'll link that in the show notes. And again, I just want to say thank you so much. It was great to meet you. Great to hear your story, and like super inspiring. I'm really glad I got the opportunity to sit and talk with you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much.